Hello my friends, in this easy Procreate lesson, we'll be creating a soft, dreamy background from start to finish. I'll walk you through each step, and I'll share my go-to brush for stars. It's one of my favorite default brushes. We'll finish up the project by using the magic wand tool to switch up the colors and create as many unique versions of the artwork as your heart desires. The only thing you'll need for this project is this template I've made for you. You can grab it for free using the link below, or better yet, you can scan this QR code to download it directly to your iPad. All you have to do is find the camera on your iPad. From here, you're going to point it at the code and wait for the yellow link to appear before tapping on it. We can now hold down on the image and choose Save to Photos. All right, so now that you've got your template ready, let's open up Procreate and jump right in. So to load your template, you're first going to open up a paper canvas here. It's a good way to avoid pixelization with our artworks. Okay, wonderful. So to load the template, we're going to go to the wrench and go to Canvas at the top, and we're going to find the reference option. And you're going to see image here in the middle, and then you can import the template just like this. The reason I like the reference box is because you can use this dash and put it far away from where you're working. And we're just going to zoom in on the colors right here. That's all we need. So I'm going to zoom in on the colors and then use this corner right here to make the box a little smaller. And you can actually pick up colors from the reference box. So we're going to start with color number 8, so you can grab that and you'll see the color there. And then we're going to go to our brushes. I'm in the classic library today. So remember, you just have to do a big pinch to find the correct library. So I'm using the older brushes, and I'm going to go to calligraphy and find my Monoline. And for this first part, I'm just going to make my brush really big, so 100% for the size. And I'm going to start with like a corner like this. So I'm making the background. I'm going to do like a smooth gradient for my background. These lines don't even need to be straight. We're just kind of drawing some lines across our page, and we need color 8, 9, and 10. So 8, 9, and then 10 for the last color. So once you have all 3 of your colors, you're going to go to the magic wand right here, and you're going to choose Gaussian blur, and you're just going to swipe your pen to the right. The more you swipe your pen to the right, the more the colors are going to blend. I just go as far as I can and blend them as much as I can. So for this project, we're going to start with the biggest elements so that we can kind of proportion our project and get it to be the way that we want and make sure everything fits. And this is where we're going to be drawing the moon. The moon is kind of the most important part of this picture because that's the light source, and all the other elements are, the way that we add color to them is going to be based on the moon. So I have a layer 2, and then I'm going to grab color number 7. And I want the moon to be a perfect circle. So it doesn't matter where you draw your moon. I'm going to draw something that looks like a circle, and I'm going to hold my pen down. And then to get a perfect circle, you're just going to put your finger down at the same time. When you're using the shapes, your finger does a lot of cool stuff. So I'm going to use my arrow, and this is where I can make a final decision on how big my moon is. So I'm going to set it to uniform, and I can make it big or small, and I can kind of put it wherever I want. Generally speaking, I want my moon to be somewhere near the top. Okay, great. And then let's make the moon look like it's glowing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my moon. I'm going to swipe left on the layer and duplicate it. So I'm going to use the bottom copy here, and then I'm going to go to my magic wand again and choose Gaussian blur. And this time we're just going to lower the reference box for a second because there's actually a number there. And when I swipe my pen to the right, I want to look at that number, and I'm going for like 30%. Keep in mind that things might look a little bit brighter on my screen than they actually are. So that's why I'm kind of telling you the number. Great, and then let's add the patterns to the moon. So I'm going to zoom in on the moon, and I'm going to grab color 14. We're going to go to the first copy of the moon. And this one we want to alpha lock so that we can add the patterns without them going over the edge. And then I'm going to find this brush. It's under Artistic, and it's called Old Beach. And I'm going to set my brush size to 7%, and I'm going to start adding the patterns that I want on my moon. So we're gonna go to our layers and we're just gonna squish the moon back together so that if we do have to move it, it's all on one layer. Great, and then we can start drawing the pink clouds that kind of go around the moon. So we're gonna go to layer 1 and we're gonna start a new layer on top of layer 1. And then I'm gonna grab color number 2 for my clouds, go back to our monoline. So I'm gonna go to the recent brush set and I'm gonna grab the monoline. Another thing worth mentioning is that I have some stabilization on my brush. So if I tap on my brush and go to stabilization, that's what my settings look like. So that makes my brush a little bit easier to use to draw those clouds. And then 20% for the size of the brush. And then I'm gonna start drawing my clouds. So the first kind of part of the cloud is just this big lump that kind of goes around the moon to kind of frame it. And then from there, I'm gonna draw like smaller little bumpy things. Sometimes I like to throw in kind of like an S shape that connects to some more bumpy things. So this is kind of the basic shape I'm going to create, and then I'm going to color it in. So once I kind of have a basic shape of my clouds, I'm going to go to the magic wand and I'm going to use Liquify to kind of move the shape around and get it to look really nice. So I'm going to go to Liquify and I want to make sure that I'm set to push for the mode. So for me, it's in this menu. For you, it might be like in a row up here, but we're going to turn distortion and momentum off. I usually use about 30% for pressure. And the size is the most important part. So you want to lean on a bigger size. So I'm going to start with like 70%. None of these numbers have to be perfect, by the way. So I'm using around 70%. And I'm just going to kind of push this shape around. Actually, 70% might not even be big enough. I think I'm just going to go with 100%. If your brush is too small, it'll make the Liquify warp your edges. It won't look very good. So start with a bigger size, and then kind of once you get the shapes you want by pushing and pulling, you can make your brush smaller for like some of the little details. Okay, so I think this overall shape that I have now makes me a little bit happier, so I can turn off the Liquify. Okay, we're gonna jump into the waves. So the color for the waves is color 16. So color 16, and then we're gonna create a new layer on top of layer 1. And I want the waves to have like pointy ends. So a brush that I really like to use for that is in inking, and it's called the Studio Pen. And I also have some stabilization, kind of the same settings that I used for my monoline, just to make it a little bit smoother. So for the size, I'm gonna set my brush size to 15%. And the way I like to draw the waves is I just kind of start with a wavy shape kind of going through my project like that. Remember, we're going to draw some clouds here in the middle, so you do want to kind of leave some space between your pink clouds and your waves. And then I'm going to follow this shape up with something that looks similar but maybe starts to deviate from the original shape, maybe kind of meets up with it here in the corner, and then I can start coloring that in. So you kind of want to think of your waves as like ribbons. And again, they're kind of abstract, so you can create a lot of different shapes. You can kind of play around with some shapes. So again, I'm going to draw like kind of a similar shape. And then maybe I'll add like a stray wavy shape here. You could do some like curly shapes. But that's kind of the overall shape that I'm looking for. Maybe I'll fill it in some more here. And again, Liquify would be a really good friend to the waves. So if you feel like your waves are kind of, the shape looks nice, but maybe not the overall composition, then using a little bit of Liquify to kind of back it off or add a little extra. Okay, let's do the final piece, which are the clouds. So we're gonna go to layer 1 and we're gonna start another new layer on layer 1. I'm gonna use color number 11 for this. And I'm gonna stick with my Studio Pen. So the way I like to draw these clouds is that I draw like a straight line first, and then on top of it, I start drawing the floofy cloud bits like this. And it really helps to just draw one curve at a time. If you try and draw too many in one go, it will, the stabilization will ruin your cloud. So I'm gonna draw some shapes like this, and then I like to draw some kind of lines at the bottom for some cloud stratification. So you can decide if you like that detail. So when you're drawing the base of the clouds, it does help to put your finger down at the same time. So if I put my finger down, it forces the line to go perfectly across the page so that your clouds don't start off kind of strangely tilted across the sky. The clouds are a little bit hard to see right now, but once we're done adding all of our details and our gradients, they will pop out the right amount. So definitely trust the process with the clouds. And don't be afraid to hide some of the clouds behind the waves or the pink clouds. We're going to start with adding some detail to the waves. So we're going to go to the layer with the waves, and then I'm going to start a new layer, and I'm going to create this as a clipping mask. So I'm going to set this layer as a clipping mask. So I'm going to go to calligraphy again, and this time I'm going to use the script brush. And if I tap on my script brush, I have the same stabilization settings that I've been using before. So you can kind of check that and make sure that you at least have some stabilization. And I'm going to start with 25% for the size. And then color 19. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a bottom edge, and I'm just going to trace it, I guess. I'm going to follow it, and I'm going to make the bottom edge a little bit darker. I'm basically going to do this to all of the wavy bits. It's going to kind of create like an abstract shadow. And then I'm going to make my brush really small, so like maybe 10%, and use color number 20 for smaller details. So the smaller details could look something like this. So I'm pressing really lightly, even though I'm using a smaller brush size, and I'm kind of adding pretty random kind of shapes that kind of follow what I already have. So this is definitely a space where you want to kind of experiment with shapes and ideas until you eventually find something that you're like, oh, that looks kind of nice. So I think that's what I'm going to add for my smaller, lighter lines. The thing that works about this dreamy background is that everything has a gradient kind of built into it. So let's do our first gradient. So we're going to grab the brush that we need. This one is in airbrushing, and it's the very first brush. It's the soft brush. And then 15% for the size, and we're going to start with a darker color, so color 18. The layer that we're going to go to is the one with the original waves. So for me, it's layer 4, and I'm just going to alpha lock this layer. And I'm going to put this darker color in the parts that are furthest away from my moon, because the moon is creating the light source. So this darker color should only go far away from the moon. So for me, it's like in these corners. And then I'm going to grab color 17 and only put it where the moon would be shining. So if you imagine the moon shining down, it would leave like this little spotlight right there. What's really important about this step is to make sure that all 3 colors are still on your page. So don't accidentally paint over the original color. Make sure that it's kind of still there a little bit. Great, and then we're just gonna go to the magic wand and do a Gaussian blur. So I'm doing around 40% for my Gaussian blur. Great, and then we're gonna do something very similar for the pink clouds. So using the same brush and everything, we're gonna go to the pink clouds and we're gonna alpha lock them. And then we're gonna use color number 3, and we're gonna put color 3 as far away from the moon as possible. So this is color number 3, and then I'm gonna use color number 1 kind of around the moon. So once I have all 3 colors for the pink clouds, I'm gonna go to the magic wand and go to Gaussian blur and just blend these. Cool, and then we're gonna do a little bit of a gradient on the clouds, but this will take a little bit more work. So we're gonna go to the cloud layer, the purple clouds, I should say, and we're gonna alpha lock this layer, and then I'm gonna set my brush size to 5%, and I'm gonna grab color number 12. For the clouds, I'm just gonna darken the bottom of the clouds, like this. So each cloud gets basically like a line across the bottom. So it looks like that. And we're not gonna use a second color right away. after you're done with color number 12 on the bottom of the clouds, you're just gonna go to Gaussian blur and we're just gonna blur it a little bit. This one we don't wanna overdo it, so maybe like 15%. Let's grab color number 13. We're gonna make our brush a little smaller, so maybe 3% for the size and 30% for opacity. And then I'm gonna start highlighting the tops of my clouds like this. And I want this to be smooth because I'm not gonna really do a Gaussian blur after I'm done with this. I mean, I could if it was really, if it wasn't smooth enough. And I really wanna only highlight the part of the cloud that's facing my moon. So this part of the cloud is gonna get highlighted. I might not highlight the back side of it. So I'm really thinking about my light source when I'm doing this and highlighting the parts of the clouds that are obviously facing my moon. And if you're struggling to get it on nice and smooth, you could lower your opacity even more. The lower your opacity, the smoother the brush ends up painting. So we're gonna find the pink clouds. Those are probably on layer 3. And I'm gonna start a new layer, and this one is also a clipping mask because I'm gonna be adding some details. And then if you go to the recent brush set, you should have your script brush ready to go in there. 25% for the size, doesn't have to be perfect, and then color number 4. So with this thicker brush, I'm just gonna, again, go around the edge of my clouds here, just like we did with the waves. So once I darken the edge, I'm gonna do another round with this brush. And this brush is really expressive. So if I press hard on it, I get thicker lines. If I press lightly, I get thinner lines. So I'm kind of playing around with the expression of this brush to create some like interesting shapes here that kind of follow the original shape of my pink clouds. I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna make it smaller. This time maybe I'll go with like, let me just see. I'm gonna go with 5% for the size. And now I'm gonna start filling in some of these spaces with thinner lines like this. And I think the trick to getting this to look nice is to keep your lines pretty close to each other. So you can decide how many of these like thinner lines you wanna add. They're just meant to kind of fill in the space in kind of like an interesting way. So whenever you finish up with these shapes, what I'd recommend trying is going to this little N right here. This is your blending mode, and just checking out some of the other options in here. You never know what you're gonna find. I do this a lot when I'm just like kind of composing something. So I think I'm gonna set mine to, I think I'm gonna use add today. So add is gonna kind of lighten it and adapt it to the gradient that's underneath. So it'll make it look a little bit more interesting and more like a wispy part of the cloud. Or you could just leave it as normal, it's totally up to you. And then the next thing that we're gonna add is stars. So for the stars, I'm just gonna make a new layer here at the very top. And then my favorite brush for stars is luminance, and then the light pen. And I usually set my brush size much larger than I think I need. So I'm gonna start with like 70%. I'm gonna use color number 7 for the stars, but you can kind of experiment with different colors. So basically you wanna press lightly for the smaller stars and then a little harder for the big stars. So you want like a nice variety of stars. And if you kind of wiggle your pen in one spot, the stars will get like really, really glowy. I'm also gonna add stars down here. But I like to make more variety of stars. So here at the bottom, I'm going to make my stars definitely some like different colors. So I'm gonna use color 20 and then probably a purple color. I might just pick the purple color myself. So down here for some of the stars, I might make my brush a little bit smaller, maybe like 7%. And then I can kind of add some lines to create like, I don't know what you would call it, like a sparkle star or something. A pulsar. I don't know my stars, but this is kind of what I'm going for. And it's hard to get these stars to be like straight, so you can always use your S tool and set it to freehand if you do end up doing those stars to kind of rotate it. I don't like it when it's kind of in an awkward angle. So you don't want to do like a ton of them, but just a few will make a big difference. Great, and then we basically only have one more detail. So I'm gonna go back to the recent brush set and I'm gonna grab my studio pen and I'm gonna use color number 3 for this. And then I'm gonna do a clipping mask on top of my purple cloud. So for me, it's layer 5. So I'm gonna start a new layer and change it to a clipping mask. And I'm gonna add an extra bonus highlight on top of these clouds. So I'm using 8% for the size of my brush. And I'm just giving these an extra bit of glow. Or sorry, not glow, definition would be the right way to say it. And then sometimes I like to add like extra little arcs to it just to make it a little bit more interesting. So yeah, this artwork works because we have gradients everywhere and then all the gradients follow the light source. So even when you're doing like abstract artwork, if you can still think about where your light source is coming from, for some reason that makes a huge difference to like that kind of it factor. Okay, so that's what my clouds look like. Now they have a little bit more definition. And then I'm also gonna add the same pink color to the details on my waves here. So this is the clipping mask on top of the blue waves. I might make my brush a little bit bigger, like 25%. And the waves also get like a little pink where they're really facing towards the light source. Because you know how sometimes water will have like a little bit of like a sunset color on it? So because we have all of our layers separated really nicely, it's really easy to play around and change the colors. But before I do that, I always want to make a duplicate of my artwork because I don't want to lose all this hard work. So I'm going to duplicate it and then I can kind of mess around with a variation. So I'll probably shut down my reference box now because I don't really need it. And there's lots of ways that we can change colors in Procreate. The two options for changing your colors are gradient map and hue, saturation, and brightness. This one is a little bit more simple. So I really like the way gradient map works for anything that has a gradient built into it. And you can see just right off the bat, I feel like that already is like a completely different version that I really like. But once I find a color scheme that I like, I can actually tap on it and I can fine tune it by moving these sliders. I can kind of adjust how it's applied to the artwork here. So I can make these final changes like that. So you can experiment with those and see if you can create a different version that you really like. So another option you can try is to go to hue, saturation, and brightness. This one is a little bit simpler. It kind of just directly changes the color. So for example, I could adjust it to match more of like the purples I'm seeing here. And then saturation can make it more colorful or less. And then brightness is pretty self-explanatory. And that's it, my friends. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you had fun and picked up a few new Procreate tricks along the way. I post new tutorials every week, so don't miss the next great project I've got cooking.